What if the next chapter of your history book wasn't written by a scholar, but by a bureaucrat? What if a single stroke of a pen rewrote wars, erased injustices, and reimagined heroes and villains not based on fact, but on political convenience? This is no longer a dystopian fantasy. On January 9th, 2025, President Name signed Executive Order 14,253, establishing a federal office tasked with verifying the accuracy, integrity, and cultural alignment of all public-facing historical materials. Supporters call it a heroic stand against misinformation and manipulation. Critics call it the death of academic freedom. Today, we unfold the most controversial executive act in modern U.S. history, a sweeping attempt to centralize the past and, by extension, control the future. This isn't just about history. It's about who we are allowed to be on, who we are allowed to remember. This is the story of Executive Order 14,253. The order opens with noble-sounding phrases: national cohesion, historical integrity, fact-driven public discourse. But within these diplomatic phrases lies something far more dangerous: bureaucratic power over truth. EO 14,253 created the Office of National Historical Standards, a department charged with reviewing all federally funded educational content, museum exhibits, public documentaries, and any institutional material that may shape historical memory. ONHS is authorized to certify or decertify academic materials, penalize educational institutions that promote destabilizing narratives, suggest content edits for cultural clarity, withhold grants from universities that promote historically toxic ideologies. By giving a federal office control over which histories are acceptable, the order turns memory into a regulatory process. The concern isn't that it tells a story, but that it tells only one story. Memory has never been neutral. It is political. What we choose to remember, what we choose to forget, is shaped by ideology, by power, by struggle. Throughout history, dominant powers have always rewritten their past to serve their present. In America, this has taken many forms: the glorification of the Founding Fathers, while minimizing their ownership of slaves; the sanitization of Native American genocide as westward expansion; the transformation of the Vietnam War from tragedy to noble failure. Executive Order 14,253 formalizes this trend into law. It doesn't simply influence how history is told, dictates who is allowed to tell it. Republicans see it as a defense against liberal rewriting of America's greatness. Democrats warn it's a slippery slope into autocracy. But beyond the left or right, EO 14,253 is a referendum on something much deeper. Can truth survive politics? Imagine standing in front of a classroom, preparing to teach about slavery, the Iraq War, or Japanese internment, to be told your lesson plan is illegal. Lesson plans must be submitted to district officials trained by ONHS. They speak about certain terms like systemic racism, genocide, or American imperialism are discouraged. Books once celebrated for academic rigor are now labeled divisive and stripped from shelves. Teachers across the country are facing new standards. We follow real teachers anonymously from Florida, Illinois, and Texas. Their fear of being disciplined for discussing civil rights, the self-censorship they now practice to protect their jobs, students. Growing confusion about their nation's identity. Public education, once a space of intellectual challenge, is becoming a corridor of compliance. EO 14253 may not burn books, but it buries them under review committees, red ink, and silence. This isn't new. Governments have always had a hand in writing or rewriting history. In Nazi Germany, the Ministry of Propaganda sanitized German history, banning Jewish lies and promoting Aryan myths. In Stalinist Russia, textbooks were reprinted annually to remove purged leaders from the past. In Turkey, school children are still taught a nationalist history that omits the Armenian genocide. In China, the Cultural Revolution erased dynasties, dissent, and dissenters alike. EO 14253 places America in a fragile position. We once mocked other countries for rewriting history. Now, we institutionalize it. The chapter compares these global tactics with EO 14253 and highlights how democracies don't need to use violence to rewrite history. They use silence, policy, and paperwork. What is a historian in a post-EO America? Once seen as custodians of the past, historians are now increasingly seen as political threats. Entire fields, Black history, gender studies, labor history are under assault. Dozens of professors have lost federal grants. University press editors are being fired for publishing culturally destructive content. Historical journals are canceling publication plans. At Columbia, Yale, and Howard University, professors tell us the chilling truth. You're either aligned with the state narrative or you're irrelevant, maybe even dangerous. Peer review is being replaced by policy review. Research is being held hostage by ideological oversight. The profession of history, once a pursuit of truth, is now treated as an act of resistance. Executive Order 14253 didn't emerge in a vacuum. It's the culmination of decades of cultural war over historical interpretation. From the 1990s textbook battles in California and Texas, to the 1619 Project, to Trump's 1776, Commission history has become the new front line in America's political divide. One side wants to celebrate America's greatness, the other wants to expose its crimes. EO 14253 attempts to resolve this war by declaring one side victorious and punishing the other. We trace the evolution of historical curriculum in schools, protests over Confederate statues, the emergence of patriotic education movements, the rise of TikTok as a battleground for competing histories. This chapter argues that EO 14253 is not about correcting history, it's about controlling the narrative. One of the key justifications for EO 14253 is the explosion of digital misinformation. Fake TikTok videos claim the Holocaust didn't happen. AI-generated documentaries distort the Civil War. YouTube channels promote the idea that the moon landing was staged by NASA to humiliate Russia. These lies spread fast and with deadly consequences. Supporters argue that EO 14253 is a bulwark against this digital tsunami of falsehoods. But critics argue it replaces chaos with censorship. Is it possible to fight lies without empowering a central ministry of truth? Should the answer to misinformation be more government control, more public education, media literacy, and transparent scholarship? This chapter asks, can truth survive the internet? The 10th Amendment protects states' rights. The First Amendment guarantees free speech. But EO 14253 appears to violate both. Civil liberties groups are suing the federal government. arguing that the order is a violation of academic freedom, an infringement on state-run education systems, a tool of ideological coercion. The government defends the order as a national security measure necessary to combat foreign manipulation and domestic unrest. Legal scholars are divided. Some say the courts will overturn it. Others believe the judiciary will defer to executive power in times of cultural emergency. We follow two ongoing lawsuits, one from the American Historical Association, another from a coalition of educators in Georgia. The courtroom becomes a battlefield where the future of history itself will be decided. America has long exported freedom of speech and academic freedom as its moral brand. But now, the world is watching and some are mocking. International media compares EO 14,253 to Hungary's Historical Protection Act, Brazil's history curriculum purge under Bolsonaro, China's censorship of U.S. textbooks in international schools. European scholars write op-eds warning of American authoritarian creep. The irony is chilling. The country that once inspired democratic ideals abroad is now borrowing tools from regimes it once condemned. In trying to protect its image, America may be losing its soul. What happens when memory becomes illegal? When governments erase the past, the people must preserve it. In underground classrooms, independent websites, banned books, and quiet conversations, truth survives. This follows. Rogue historians, publishing anonymously online students, creating secret clubs to study forbidden events. A new generation of activists who see history not as heritage, but as resistance in the final scene. We return to the idea that memory is not a luxury, it is a right. History is not the enemy of patriotism, it is its conscience. And as long as people remember, no executive order can fully erase the truth. We began with a question. Should the government control historical truth? Now we end with a warning. If it does, what will be left of us? Truth is not fragile. It doesn't need protection from scrutiny, it needs protection from power. In the age of Executive Order 14,253, remembering has become an act of rebellion. Thank you for watching. If this documentary opened your eyes, like and subscribe. Comment your thoughts. We want to hear all sides. And join us in our next video as we explore another front in the war for truth. Truth is never neutral, but it should always be free.